Okay. All right. Well, we're here for day 10 analysis. I'm Amber Cohen,
And I'm Kelly Sanders.
and we are trial lawyers, and we love to watch trials. We are actually filming from New York City. We've been attending Legal Week at the downtown Manhattan all week. So we were excited. I know we've been delayed in getting you the day 10 recap. But we want to get started here because we're actually up against the wall on timing. But day 10, we have some, interesting issues that came up. I know that it started with Cody Wright, right?
Yes, he started the day. Yeah, I think day 10 was a pretty big day for the prosecution, starting with Cody Wright. We learned a little bit more about him, right? He was one of Eric's best friends. He's the business partner, really creative name, right? Cody and Eric's. That's what they made the business name, C&E Masonry, 50/50 business partners. It sounded like they were friends for about 12 years, became business partners, traveled together, hunted together. Um, and seemed like they were pretty close. Although it did come out, I thought this was interesting, that Cody participated in an investigation that ultimately landed Eric. Seemed like he did some short time in jail or something related to hunting and permits. And Cody turned over truthful information when he was interviewed, and that he didn't cover for his friend. The prosecution also got into the fact that C&E Masonry, the business, loaned Kouri $200,000 for her business. But, I think the defense really cleaned that up later on by getting him to say that she not only paid that back, she paid it back with interest. Personally, I really didn't see what the point of that was, given that she did pay that back. Just seemed like another way to kind of pile on to this idea that she was maybe acting in bad faith, but I didn't think that landed quite well, given that she did ultimately pay that money back. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that that was necessarily all that impactful about the money that was loaned or invested by C&E. The part about the hunting, it's my understanding that Eric was a big avid hunter, and he went and killed an elk without the proper tagging, is I think what he testified to, and so that's a pretty big, federal issue. And so so obviously Cody had to participate in that investigation, or he could have been probably charged himself if they thought he was collaborating at all in any way or conspiring. And so Cody, said basically, I told Eric I was going to be talking to the police. I mean, I had no choice. So that came out. And then I think the defense was able to get in after that, that basically the family split apart, right? So they didn't go on to vacations anymore after that. And the family had sort of divided. So the defense was able to get that out.
But I
Um,
think the key part about that, though, is that because of that and because of what happened, Eric started hunting in Mexico. And I think that was the key of why the defense really wanted to highlight that piece, because part of their defense is that perhaps Eric was going to Mexico and purchasing drugs or illicit drugs, or possibly the fentanyl from Mexico and bringing it back here. So I think that's why they really wanted to hammer that home, that because of that, he had to go to Mexico to do his hunting.
Yeah, he was basically banned from the United States for hunting. So law enforcement said, no, no, can't hunt here anymore. So he goes down and starts outfitting and they do get him to specifically say Sonora and Sonora, Mexico. So that's an important piece. They get that fact out of him. They also get the fact that he owns the trucks, that C&E owns the trucks. And that immediately after Eric's death, they pull the trucks from Kouri. They take the F550 or something, which I didn't even realize they make them that big. They take the F550 from her, excuse me. And then they leave her with, I think, the red truck for a little bit and ultimately take that truck from her as well.
Yeah, it
You
sounds
know,
like that's the truck she was like using to get around in.
yeah, right. I think that it's clear. that he was suspect of Kouri, because again, he testified about that phone call that occurred on Valentine's Day. He said it was similar to that. Well, let me back up. Eric called Cody to say he thought he was sick. He thought he had been poisoned, something to that effect. And he sounded as scared. I think he listed two incidents. One was,
When his
if you
mom died.
his mom passing away, and another was maybe an accident. I can't
Yeah, I think it
recall.
was another time he got rear-ended.
Yeah. So between the two, he said he sounded, as freaked out as those two incidents. And so that was sort of validating the way his mental impression left that phone call and why he remembered it. So I thought that was good for the prosecution. I mean, the prosecution's just been, steady Eddie. They have been very, full steam ahead. They've been laying out a lot of facts. And on some level, I'm not, I'm not sure they're doing too much on some level, but again, when you have such a case where it's really all circumstantial evidence, I mean, I think they need to touch on everything. So they are doing that. And the defense is, we're going to see it, I think, come together, but the defense is weaving in their theory here. They're just getting these facts out that they need in order to eventually argue to the jury at closing. So next we had a handwriting expert, and they brought him in.
Well, before we go back to the handwriting expert, I think we're missing a big part about Cody's testimony where things went a little bit off the rails during
Remind me.
the drugs.
Oh God, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
we can't move on without talking about the drugs.
Yes.
And actually, just real quick before we get on to the drugs, I think a couple other important parts that came out about that, which will tie in a little bit later, that they took the trucks and they took the computers.
Yes.
And
Yep.
those, and it wasn't taken by the police. It was taken by Cody, given to I think he testified that it's now with the sisters. So I think that becomes a really important piece later on in terms of chain of custody. When we find out later on that the trucks weren't searched on the night of the incident and they go through many people's hands before the police ever get them. Same thing with the C&E computers. They send Becky to the house to go get that. But then we get into some testimony where I thought things kind of went off the rails, and I really loved this judge. I think, and I still love his demeanor. I'm not sure personally, I don't think he made the right call with some of this. It didn't sit right with me. But essentially, what happens is the defense gets Cody to ask Cody if he knew that Eric used the weed, starts with the weed gummies, and he says something along the lines of, he never told me, because my understanding is Cody is part of the Mormon faith. It's a dry faith that doesn't believe in drugs or alcohol, and Cody, out of respect, like wouldn't talk to Eric, out of respect for Cody, didn't really talk to him about drinking or, using the weed gummies, but that he had heard from other people that Cody used these weed gummies. And then the defense asked if he was aware that, if he knew from other people that Eric ever used illicit street drugs, or I think the word the defense actually used at the time was illegal illicit drugs. And the prosecution objects to that, and ultimately we end up in a voir dire of Cody about what he knew about Eric's drug use from some prior inconsistent statements that Cody has made. Do you want to explain the statements that he made that the defense was trying to get in?
Yeah, so I think it started with at the trial, they said, I think, and they said that they had heard he had used drugs. And so Attorney Nestor wanted to get back up and impeach him with a prior statement. And the prior statement was that he had used, I think they were called Red Devils or Red.
It says prior testimony was that he had heard from other people that Eric had a prescription pain pill addiction in high school. And then
Right.
I think then he says, well, I think they used to call them Red Devils.
Yeah, right. So he says they're called Red Devils. So she wants to get into that. And this is where the argument with the judge starts, because the judge is like, well, you don't have enough foundation to establish what a red devil is. And in that prior testimony, which is locked in, because that was the testimony, they have the transcript. The judge said basically, that's not enough to tell me or the juror that a red devil equals an illicit street drug. And so, and I know we part a little bit here because I do believe the judge is right that there wasn't enough to say that the red devil equals an illicit street drug. So they did allow her to voir dire, and that was the purpose of the voir dire, to be able to see if she could get him to say that a red devil is an illicit street drug. She tries, but he basically is like, I don't even know what these drugs are. I mean, I don't know what it is, so I can't say one way or another if it is an illicit street drug. And ultimately, she's not able to really impeach him with that testimony. The judge doesn't, he excludes it and says, I'm sorry, you're not able to connect the dots.
Well, he excludes it for hearsay, right?
Yeah,
Because Eric's saying this is what other people told me. He didn't know Cody is saying other people told him this. He didn't know Eric in high school. And not only that, he doesn't know what red devils are. He doesn't really know anything about drugs. The reason why I didn't like this was that before this voir dire, the jury has heard the question was, did you when other people have said that he's used these weed gummies, did you ever know him or hear that he used illicit street drugs? And he says no.
right.
And then we ultimately find out that he has previously testified that he knew that he had, whether or not it's a pain pill addiction, red devils, there was some testimony that maybe it was Sudafed. Defense says they have an expert that's going to come in and say they were PCP. Either way, we now have a jury hearing his testimony and that they've heard that he did not know that from anybody that Eric ever used these drugs. And we quite simply at this fact just know that that's not true. Whether or not it's Sudafed or PCP or whatever it may have ultimately been, it wasn't. And the judge and attorney Nestor got into about whether or not if you're taking prescription pills that aren't yours, if that's illicit street drugs. I kind of disagree with him on this. I think ultimately, I think aren't we the whole case here is buying prescription drugs from Carmen buying drugs from another drug dealer that are prescription pills. Like it's not intended purpose. I think the parlance of whether or not you would say that's an illicit street drug versus some type of substance abuse. Either way, I don't think the testimony that the jurors heard was ultimately true. And I do think that the defense should have been able to get some of that and impeach him with his inconsistent statement.
The problem is Attorney Nestor and this defense team is exhausted, right? So I think that you have to remember when your state's case and you're working for the government, you've got the power of the entire state of Utah behind you, right? Helping you build this case. So although Attorney Bloodworth is the face of the case, he's got, prosecutor investigators, he's got the victim witness advocates, he's got everyone basically at his fingertips, including the case chief officer in the courtroom. We later find, in there the whole time, basically able to maneuver and navigate. And although Kouri Richins has her defense team, it's very limited, right? It's just the four of them and it's there trying to figure it out. And they don't know what's coming next, even though we have full discovery and everybody has to share their information. Prosecution absolutely has to share their case. It doesn't necessarily mean they know what's next to come. So it's exhausting. They're tired. And I really think that Attorney Nestor, although, it's just, she struggled a little bit with this because where Attorney Bloodworth got her was he asked a very specific question, which was this, did you know him to use an illicit street drug? So him having a pain addiction or pain pills in high school or, none of that is captured in that sentence. And he did not stray from that. So that's the difference between a sloppy question and a very articulate question that you just want the jury to hear that answer, because that's all he cares about. Right.
Yes, but so the judge lets him ask that question, right? Because even Cody answering that question calls for hearsay. because you're asking him because he didn't know Eric in high school. So he's asking him, did you know him to use illicit street drugs? Whether it's illicit street drugs, street drugs, whatever. He's still asking him a question that is calling for hearsay, asking Cody to say whether or not he has information other people have told him. He's only allowed to answer that question because the judge rules that the defense has opened the door to that question by asking it on
Correct.
cross-examination. The solution here would have been, because now the judge denies the defense from impeaching him because and doesn't want them and is not going to allow them to elicit that testimony because it calls for hearsay. So in my opinion, the solution would have been to just strike that testimony, to strike that question, strike his answer, and then that resolves it. Now you've told the jury they can't consider him saying that he didn't know him to use the illicit street drug. I disagree with a ruling that you open the door to some hearsay on this question, but then then the door isn't open to get in hearsay for the impeachment purposes.
Well, she
And he
opened
could have just stricken it, and I think this was one of his a misstep.
She opened the door by asking him, had you heard he used drugs, right?
Well, she started with the weed gummies and then she went on to the drug.
But she opened it up to this sort of broader, like you'd heard he used drugs
Right.
before. And so where I think he wanted to just target, which is this illegal street drug, which would be fentanyl, whatever they're gonna say he brought in from
Well,
Mexico.
fentanyl is not always an illicit that this is where I disagree with the judge piece
I
too, because
know,
fentanyl
I
is
know.
not always an illicit street drug either. If you're gonna say that you can't say that, you know, what is an illicit street drug? Is it just heroin? Is it just cocaine? Are you limiting to just those types of things, or are we talking about people buying Vicodin or buying Oxycontin? Sometimes fentanyl is also a prescription. It's not always an illicit street drug. I think the argument is it was here. But I think it was a little inconsistent about what is a street drug, what's not a street drug.
It
Yeah.
was a pretty powerful blow, honestly, to her because I know she wanted to get that impeachment in. So that was,
And I think
that
he
was
should,
a
yeah,
that
either
was a
strike
tough one to
it or
take.
let her strike that or let the whole thing in. Because it doesn't sit well with me that the jury has heard testimony that we now know is not true.
Right. Um, so before we go on though, I just want to say if you like anything you see here, if just a slight reminder, if you don't mind liking our video or subscribing, better yet. And we are very grateful to be here. We're enjoying it. And so we're going to move on to the second part. I think there might be more that we have to sort of weave in with Cody, but just want to keep it moving here for the handwriting expert that the state was able to introduce.
Yeah, so then the state called Matthew Throckmorton a forensic document examiner. And essentially, the basis of his testimony is that he reviews documents, he reviews handwriting. I kind of would classify him more of like a handwriting expert if you kind of think of it that way. He testified that there was no evidence that Eric authored the life insurance policy application. But that he also couldn't rule out that or couldn't rule in that Kouri wrote it either. So he felt confident saying that Eric didn't do it, but he couldn't say that Kouri did it. It kind of just made me think, like, personally, like, I know I have life insurance policies that other people have helped me submit applications for too. So it's it's not a crazy world where somebody else might be helping you fill out an application for something like this. And given that he couldn't say Kouri did it, I didn't find it to be all that powerful, but the jury might feel otherwise.
Yeah. The only thing that I noted from his testimony was the defense, when it came to the defense side, they attempted to introduce something that was called, I think, the princess letter. I don't really know anything about it. I can't even recall at this time if it was Attorney Nestor or Lewis, but one of them attempted to introduce it. It wasn't allowed in. And the other thing that they did get in, though, was they asked whether or not drug use would change or alter a handwriting characteristic. So, in essence, although, that perhaps he could have drafted something himself, it could look different than when he normally signed or look, although I think they came around and he said, well, it would have some similarities, but they were able to sort of get that out. I'm not sure how much
Yeah.
that landed,
They
but
really tried to hammer that he's not a certified forensic document examiner. And we kind of know this from our profession, right? That you can be certified because you pay a membership fee to some organization that
Yeah.
throws a stamp on your website or something and calls you certified. I thought he handled it pretty well. I did think they made a little bit of a point that there's been some research out there that perhaps this is an area of science that really needs some strengthening and perhaps isn't the most reliable. Especially given that he wasn't able to definitively say one way or the other, like who actually authored it. I think that it's, ultimately up to the jury to decide how much weight they give this.
To give it.
I
Yeah.
think I thought it was a little bit of a nothing burger there.
Yeah. The next segment that they introduce into the trial is the 911 call made by Kouri into obviously dispatch after she finds Eric dead in the bed. What do you think of that call?
On one hand, you want to say it's really heartbreaking because you can hear somebody who's obviously found their husband deceased and the officer, the dispatcher, excuse me, walking her through how to perform CPR. I'm sure the jury is doing what I was doing, or I imagine they were trying to tell her, like, is she fake crying? I really, honestly, I couldn't really tell. I wouldn't feel confident saying like, oh, that sounded like she was faking it versus she sounded genuinely shocked. What I thought was interesting about it though is that you can hear the dispatcher walking her through like how to move him off the bed, how to perform 911. It sounded to me like she started actually performing CPR, but then I thought we've heard testimony or evidence come in that they were claiming that she never did any CPR on him. So I wasn't really sure what to make of it. I do think it is where you get some of the first statements about what she says happened, right? She woke up in her son's room, went to the bedroom, found him cold, pale, and with no pulse. So I guess it is the first time you hear her statement of what's happening. What did you think of the 911 call?
So I think, first off, I think that really it's we talk about how jurors, this is what they're evaluating, right? They whether or not they're analyzing how someone is reacting to a very traumatic event. And obviously everyone, I would say, reacts very differently in certain situations. Some grieve and they're angry, some grieve and they're sad, some grieve and they're, silent. So we all have really human emotions, and that's what makes this the human experience. I think that if you're leaning towards, the Kouri Richins corner, you can hear the authenticity in her voice and you can understand why first of all, she's calling, she's crying. I do believe she's crying. But she is aware that he's dead. I think that she knows that she's taken his pulse at some point, which arguably you're like, do you take a pulse? I don't know if I would, necessarily do that, but I mean, maybe that's what you do, I guess, when you're in an emergency situation. And but what really had me was when the kids come in the room and she's like, my kids are here, and she's starting to really like crumble because she wants to keep it together for them. She's trying to listen to 911. And by that point, I think first responders are at the door anyway to let them in. And then they're like, obviously you can hear the dispatcher saying, keep me on the phone until they start the CPR. And but if you're in the prosecution side, you're saying this is all pretty staged, right? I mean, she knows he's dead. She's taken his pulse. She's already called. He's dead. And she's kind of not really doing what I'm asking her to do, which is try to save his life. Take the sheet, pull him off the bed. And she's like, I can't even move him. So, the question becomes, whose side are you on? At this point, I think the jury is seeing things through their lenses. And
Whatever
that's
way which they have put those lenses on nine
Yeah,
days ago.
yeah. And I think that's why the state has really focused in on how they're sort of getting to the pinnacle of their case, right? So they've made this whole big motive argument, and now they're going to let you hear her, see her, all this evidence, the letter that's to come and all that, and then really analyze it through the lens of which you believe. And if you believe that she's, innocent and not didn't do this, or, whatever, maybe that's too strong, but that they haven't really shown you that she's done this, then you're going to say, you're going to look at it with a much more critical eye. Whereas if, you're like, oh yeah, she's totally, I mean, this is crazy. Like, why are we even here? Like, it's like, yeah, she's guilty. Obviously, listen to this tape, but listening to many, many, many 911 calls, I will tell you that people act differently, and it's not indicative necessarily of the crime just by what you hear, but I do think it is helpful to hear. And so,
And that
I
that
get,
comes into that's where individual juror experiences can be important, right? Have you ever been in a situation where something traumatic has happened and you have gone into shock?
yeah,
I know that I have had something like that happen when I was in an accident and broke a bone when I was a child, and I can remember like I was in complete shock, didn't shed a tear, don't remember feeling an ounce of pain, and went into like just like sat there silent, and so it is possible that something like that can happen. And I really am a true believer that we never know how we're going to react until we're in that situation. And you're experiencing it for yourself. So you're looking at the jurors, like what's their own experiences with that? Have they ever found someone passed away? Have they ever had to call 911 because something traumatic has happened? And they could look back at their own experiences, like how did I react in that situation? Because not everybody is going to be overly emotional crying. I mean, you could, truly, if you're finding your husband passed away, you could go into complete shock and have an affect of the way you're presenting yourself that other people are going to be like, that's not how I would react. I would be a mess. I would be crying. I would be on the floor. I would be inconsolable. But at the end of the day, I really don't truly know. You really never know how you're going to react until it actually happens to you.
yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, I like the way that the prosecution has lined up this case. I mean, I do think there is some theatrical, you know, part of it. Like they're getting to that, crescendo of the story, and we're all just waiting. And, but at some point that is also true. Like I'm waiting. Like, okay, where's the linchpin to this case? Because right now, I still don't know how he took the drug. I'm still not even sure it's fentanyl. I'm not even 100% sure when he died. Like you have these questions. And so
If it
these
was
are,
fentanyl, who did she get it from? Because it was it really from Kouri? Did Kouri ask for fentanyl? Like
yeah,
I'm really not there. I'm still not there yet.
yeah.
And I still have some questions.
Yeah. So for that, I do think that, but I see how he's doing it, and I like the way he's doing it, because I think if I'm a juror, I mean, it's a way to keep people interested in the case. You're not losing their interest. So, which is good, because this deep into the case, day 10 of a case, that's a lot. We're asking jurors to do a lot here. So, and remember, what's happening. And again, I think some of the, defense team is exhausted. They're getting tired, and it's, this is a marathon. These are not sprints, right? So,
I mean, just
it's,
just talking about trial experience a little bit, right? Because you and I have done it, and unless you actually have ever tried a case, you don't quite know how exhausting and how overwhelming it can be, right? Now, what we're seeing, what the jury is seeing as the audience or the jurors like sitting there watching it, you're seeing the 9 to 5 or whatever of the time period that they're actually in court. That doesn't, this was years in the making. This is extreme amounts of data that you have had to ingest and process and try to remember where it all is and who said what and keep track of dates. This spans years of time. So now you're done with court for the day. You still have to talk to your client to recap the day, who now has to go back, who's going back to her jail. You have to prep your testimony for the next day. If you've just ended a direct, you're going back, if a direct has just ended and you're getting ready for cross the next day, you're going back looking at their testimony, pulling out exhibits, looking at their prior testimony, up all night, and getting ready to do it all over again the next day.
yeah, I mean,
There's not a moment of rest in this.
they could be going back to the jail where she's being housed right now while this trial's going on, and prepping her. At the end of the day, they have to be actively thinking about whether or not they're going to need her to testify. And if they're responsible at all in this, which, sometimes we have time, sometimes we don't, depending on what's going on in the trial. You need to be going to the jail. You need to be sitting with your client and prepping them and figuring out where the holes are and what, what the risks are. Because again, oftentimes if a defendant takes a stand, it's natural. It's not supposed to happen, but it's natural for these jurors to shift the burden to the defense. And that is not supposed to happen. It is not the defense's burden to prove this case. However, if you think you're losing and you need to fill some gaps and you need to get some evidence in through her, then obviously that's going to be your only key. Because as we find out, either here or the next day, I can't recall, is that, she's not allowed to pick and choose her own statements. She's not allowed to pick and choose what she wants to admit. If she wants full, complete, like interview record or statements that are drafted, she's going to have to take the stand and submit it through her own testimony. So they're also backdoor prepping for that. There's a lot, it's a lot. I think the general rule of thumb is for every hour of trial, it's 5 hours of prep. So just imagine you're talking 9-hour days in court. You're talking now 10. So that's, it's a ton of hours. It's a
They
marathon.
don't live nearby. If they don't live close nearby, they're probably staying in a hotel somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Living out of a hotel.
Most likely. I mean, I don't know, maybe they live really close by, but if you don't in this kind of trial, you can't waste it. You can't afford to spend the time on a commute anywhere. You need to be really close by. You need to be close to your client. You need to be close by to the courthouse. You can't spend the hour or two in the morning. You can't afford that hour or two, with the
Yeah.
commute.
And not to mention, but look
So
around too. Like you don't see water, like you don't see a lot of water snap. I mean, it's like you're just going. I mean, this is game on and it is very stressful. So
dehydration during trial is a real thing.
it is a real thing. Well, because there's nothing worse, honestly, true fact, than having to use the restroom when you're in the middle of trial. You can't do that. So it's like, I can't drink any water because I have to keep going unless the judge or the juror needs the restroom break. You don't ever see a lawyer asking for a restroom break. It just doesn't happen.
Bloodworth does it when he does. There is one day, I know it was a couple of days ago, but he did say I need a restroom break.
Well, maybe it was an emergency. He's like, I
Yeah, you
really
never
need the
know.
bathroom. So,
We're all humans and things like that
yeah.
happen. We have to eat, we have to drink, we have to go to the bathroom.
Well, back in the olden days, I mean, now we're a little more forward here, post 2020. I think a lot has come far, but there was really no room for it. So I think judges are a lot more tolerant of these kinds of, basic biological needs, but it's great to know that. All right, so then we get into Deputy Woody,
Yes.
and she takes the stand.
Yes, Deputy Woody, pretty limited testimony, but she was one of the responding officers on the night that Eric was found. What I found interesting about her testimony is that essentially, like, and correct me if my misunderstanding is wrong here, like she's basically met at the house by Eric's sisters in the driveway before she even gets into the house. So her first perception of this case is his sisters saying that Eric threatened to kill him. So basically, before she even walks into this crime scene, she's already got the lens on, right? That maybe this is a murder or you would think that she'd come in with maybe this is a murder investigation. I don't think that's ultimately how it played out, given what we hear on her testimony. But that starts that's how she starts the investigation, is by hearing that.
Yeah, I think it's Amy, right? Amy meets her at the driveway and says, my brother has told us that Kouri wants him dead. And so that immediately, but that actually, in my opinion, I know that Attorney Nestor, I think it was sort of like didn't want this to get in, but I actually think it's helpful for the defense. Because if that's the case, if they know from the moment they get to that house that this is a murder investigation, then they should have done more for the forensic piece of this. Because in my opinion, because they don't have forensics to show that fentanyl was in that house, that fentanyl was in a drink, in a straw, in a trash, and anywhere, they didn't take the truck. I mean, they should have got the warrant. They should have got the truck. They should have searched the truck. They didn't do any of that. And so really, not that I don't want to totally blame law enforcement, but at the same time, with a closing argument, you can say they were on notice right away that this was a murder investigation and they didn't do anything to secure that scene. They didn't do anything to secure that truck. And, here we are. I mean, and obviously the sisters believe that he was being poisoned before. So it's not like this was a weird theme, right? So,
Well,
anyway.
ultimately, what Deputy Woody testifies to is right in terms of what they do collect and what they do look at. They get out that when you're responding to an unattended death like that, which is what this is, right? This wasn't a death that occurred by a doctor nearby or in a hospital setting, unattended, not visible, like what the cause of death is, that they're allowed to search the immediate surrounding area, which makes sense, right? You go into a room, you've got a dead body, you want to look around, right? Is there a knife? Is there a gun? Like, is there a pill bottle or something like that that's going to give me clues or context as to like what might have happened here. So they search the immediate room. They don't really in that area. They search the trash cans in the bathroom. They note that the trash cans are empty. They ask Kouri why they're empty, and she tells them that the housekeeper had taken out the trash that day. They do ask Kouri for permission to check the kitchen trash. So Wright, obviously they can, without a warrant and without consent, can search the immediate area. Outside of that search, they need either consent of the owner or they need to apply for a warrant to search. They ask Kouri for permission to search the trash can because based on the statements that Kouri has given them, the area near the living room and the kitchen was the last area he would be in, so it would make sense to check the trash if there's any evidence that might give them some context as to what happened. She cooperates, she gives them that permission, she allows them that search. They don't ask for permission to search anything else, and I think that that was important for the defense really to bring that out, that she gave them that permission and you didn't ask for permission to search for anything else. So it's not like she said, yeah, you can search the trash can, but you can't look, in this room or whatever. The defense was able to get out that they did not search the trash cans outside, which I found interesting, right? Because if you're looking in the bathroom and you're saying those are empty and she says, well, the housekeeper took it out, wouldn't you want to go search the trash where that was ultimately most likely put, right? And if you're taking it out, it's probably in the trash cans outside. They don't search that. They find no fentanyl in the house. There's no evidence of fentanyl or these drugs in the house. They don't look in the cars. They don't really secure the scene aside from the immediate room. And so really it was just to highlight, in my mind, what they didn't do, which sometimes as the defense is part of your job, right? Like what didn't law enforcement do that they maybe should have?
Yeah, I mean, I know that another little nugget that I think they got in was that they did find a hydrocodone bottle next to Eric's side of the bed. And so
Empty.
empty, right.
And didn't test
So
it, never tested it. And as we sit here at this trial watching it, that bottle has never been tested.
not only never been tested, but I think we find out later, a little,
It's gone.
spoiler alert, they can't find it. So that's also a problem. And I think that, the officers, well, first off, I think Deputy Woody, she's newer, maybe only had a couple death cases. And then we have, is it a Detective O'Driscoll that ends up being the case?
That he takes over. I think she testifies she gets promoted to a canine officer. And so she comes off the case and Detective Driscoll becomes the lead investigator on the case.
He too is also new in the realm of a murder investigation. So, we may just be seeing some mistakes, some sort of what I quote, rookie mistakes or beginner officer mistakes, but I'm not 100% sure because it just may not be there. At the end of the day, the evidence may just not be there because maybe it wasn't murder. I mean, that's also the alternative, right? I mean,
Well,
maybe
let me
they
play
were
devil.
making mistakes.
Let me play devil's advocate, right? Because we're saying like she's met at the door by the sister, maybe this is a murder. So you're going in that there's, this wife that's previously threatened the husband and they don't secure the scene. They don't get a search warrant. They don't search everything. So flip it and think that what would we be thinking or what would the defense be arguing if hearing that information from the sister prompted this major investigation, they apply for warrants right away. I think we would be saying sort of what has trickled in a little bit that this entire investigation was guided and tainted by the family. That law enforcement is basically doing what they want them to do and following what they're asking them to do. So I kind of think there was in some ways, a no-win for them. So I actually do think that by testifying that we would have needed more probable cause and in that moment we didn't have it because they didn't find anything, right? If they had found fentanyl in a garbage can or if they had found something like that, I think it would have given them probable cause to start applying for those warrants. But I do think that if they had just gone ahead and done that, and
I'm,
started searching more, that we would be sitting here saying the exact opposite.
I'm not sure she wouldn't have given permission. I mean, from
That
everything that I've
too.
seen so far, she's not shut them down in any way. I've seen no resistance from her. In fact, she's calling her friends, like, I can't even believe this. What is fentanyl? Like, so I mean, she's not at all shy. So, and I think I think Attorney Nestor gets that out later from O'Driscoll, but partially here too, that she was able to search and then that there was another housekeeper, et cetera, at that point. And that's a different issue that comes up with our next witness, which this is sort of like, I mean, we don't have a lot of time, Kelly, because we have
Yeah.
to
We have to
check out
check out
the
of our
hotel
hotel.
and we have to catch a train and head back to Boston. But so here's the thing, the private investigator hired by the family.
What a character.
Yes, I can't
I thought
even,
he was quite a character.
I had to go back and watch him twice. I just was like, who is this man? Like, what's going on, sir? But
Todd Gabler, he is a private investigator. What I thought was interesting, and I do think will lend to some credibility for him, I mean, perhaps for a juror. He's been involved in investigating over 100 murders, and this is the first time he's ever testified for the state. He always testifies for the defense. And I did find that to be, a little bit interesting. So, as a juror, perhaps you're looking at this as, okay, well, he doesn't usually do this, so he must be on the side of, really wanting us to know what happened here.
well,
Um,
I do think it's notable, but also too, the family hired him right away, right? And they hired him to investigate the civil case, not the murder case. Let's remember there is a civil suit. The family is, entrenched with Kouri with respect to the home and the trust and the money piece of this. It looks like I think Kouri filed that suit right away, almost within weeks or months. If I'm not 100% sure that timeline, but I know she went and filed, tried to keep the house, etc. So technically, he's working on the defense side of the civil case,
that
and the
is true.
prosecution brought him in for because obviously he's working for the family, so they brought him in. But either way,
So he's working for the family, he's investigating, he's given once the police are done searching Kouri's home after she gets arrested in May of 23, he essentially has full access to the home. He comes in there quite frequently. It comes out, I just thought this whole thing was a little bit strange that like he's going into the house and still finding things. Even though this house, we're talking over a year after his death, after Eric's death, he's still finding things in the house and directing the police to come back to the house to search it. I thought that was a little bit strange. Um, yeah,
well, I think he doesn't get access to the home, right? I think because until Kouri actually is arrested, or did I misremember
right.
that?
So the
Yeah.
family starts to allow him the access. I believe she's arrested on like May 13th, I believe, and he's allowed access to the home like the next day or
Like, yeah,
something.
same day or whatever. I think that
Um,
was, yeah.
there was a piece of his test, so he's allowed access. He's able to look at, he's given access to the business. He's given access to the business laptops, to the documents in the house. He's scanning things in. He's video recording all of this, so that if there's any questions about what he's done or his integrity, he has video evidence to back that up. And there was just a moment that and I have a lot of grace from what we've talked about that this is hard. You're tired, you're overwhelmed. But I really think there was a moment with the defense in his cross-examination that they just lost so much credibility with, and really might have lost the jury, which is when they're making it seem like there's a video of him removing Eric's laptop from the house. And they're trying to get him before they show. So they're going to use this video later to try to impeach him. So they're trying to ask him, like, did you ever take the laptops out of the house? And he's saying no, right? So the insinuation is maybe he's planting evidence on them or something like that. So they try to impeach him with this video to show him leaving with the laptop. And before they can even play the video, it looks like they basically get the still image up of this. And he's like, that's my laptop.
It's
It's
embarrassing. It's
so
just it's a
embarrassing.
swing and a miss, and it happens to us all, and
It
it's
does.
unfortunate. But it was embarrassing. It was an oversight. It was probably, one of the assistants helping her, like, oh, like this piece, whatever. It didn't land. It was bad. And she was wrong. So it made her look bad. But she does come back over the top because I think she gets him to admit that he told police that Kouri lied about the housekeeper and the housekeeper's name, that she didn't have a new housekeeper. And then, truth be told, she did have a new housekeeper, and she had to have him correct that in fact, he told police that Kouri lied and she did not lie. So I thought that was a really important part. However, I think these pieces are getting lost because the dynamic with him was so combative and it was snarky and like, I don't even know. It was uncomfortable. It was
Personally, I
uncomfortable for
thought
me
he
to
came
watch.
across, it was uncomfortable. I thought he came across really unprofessional. By the
Yeah.
time we get to the cross-examination, I just found him to be completely unprofessional at that
And
point.
the thing about Attorney Nestor is, okay, so she's tired. The questions aren't articulate as they could be. The judge is extremely patient. And if he was losing his patience, I could see the judge getting annoyed with her. But because he's been so kind and graceful towards her, I actually don't know if they're getting annoyed with her. What I think was annoying was this PI. That's annoying. I mean, granted, he testified he did 965 hours for this family. And again, what do we got? We got no drugs. We got no proof of fentanyl. He didn't go to Mexico. I mean, they got that out of him. Like, did you go to Mexico to see like did you retrace Eric's steps? He was in Mexico the week before he died. Did you speak to anyone about what he did while he was in Mexico? And no, no, I didn't. You know what I did do? I focused on the stuff that was for the civil case, really, and they were trying to weave it in, for purposes of the defense. But I don't like to, I don't know. He obviously clearly seems to be a competent PI, but he was offended by her questioning, and it came out, and again, I've
He
been
was,
on this,
there were times that he was smirking. He was almost borderline laughing at her.
yeah.
And there were moments where I just want like yell into the computer while I'm watching this. Sir, this is a murder trial. Act like this is a murder trial. Like
And
be
not only that, but
professional.
your clients are sitting in this, like right behind her, and they're paying you a ton of money to get this right. And if you're like sort of being theatrical, again, if you're on the jury side, if you're on the state side and the jury's like, oh, I like him, like, yeah, give it to her, play hard to get with
Then
her,
maybe it works for those
then
jurors. Yeah.
maybe it works. But I mean, and again, trying to sort of be in between, I just think it was off-putting. I just don't like that. But there are a lot of people that like that. And so,
There
it
were
very
people that
well.
feel like, he owned the defense up there.
Yep, that it got fuel, and there we go. She tried to ask about sexting. She asked the
Well, that also just fell really
that
flat.
fell apart. It fell apart. Like nobody cares if he's texting the girlfriend. We don't care. I mean, unless you're trying to say that the girlfriend tried to kill him, I really don't care if he's
No,
texting someone
the
else. Like,
sexting, but the sexting though, let it not be lost. The sexting was with Cody.
I know.
So it wasn't even a girlfriend. Like, so
I
I
know.
was so lost in that. Like, I don't know, having, brothers and, a lot of men in our life, sometimes they do joke around with each other like
Yeah.
that. I think that really landed poorly. And I was also wondering, like, as the defense, what's the purpose of that? Are you trying to insinuate that Kouri was, or that Eric was gay? Like, is that the insinuation you're trying to make? And if so, why would you do that? It was poorly done. It was clunky. It bought them no points, and it lost them credibility ultimately because I thought it was all ridiculous.
Yeah, every question they have should go towards their theory and sowing that doubt. And I just didn't think that really, it was a distraction. And again, you're giving more fodder to an already difficult witness. I mean, he was very difficult. I think she tried to play, charming and like try to play to him a little bit because sometimes you got to bob and weave when you got a difficult witness. He just was not going to give it to her no matter what. So she really, in my opinion, needed to take some charge. Like I probably would have got more aggressive with him in the sense of like, you're not running this show right now. I'm running this show, and I have some questions that you need to answer. And here you go. Like, and she just didn't do that. She kind of played it back, allowed him to smile and smirk and,
At the same
like,
time, I was like, please don't ask him if he thinks anything is funny here, because I could already, because I have seen attorneys do that,
I
right? Once
know.
it's up there, like, what, do you think something's funny with this? Is this a joke to you? I
Yeah.
think it would have backfired on her because his response would have probably been something like, well, your questions are so silly, I can't help but laughing.
Yeah. Or you're the
And so
joke.
it could
Yeah.
have really backfired. So I actually was glad she didn't take the bait there because I don't think it would have, I think it would have backfired on her.
She didn't take the bait. Meanwhile, I think, I'm not sure what was the main point that he really processed for the state.
I'm not even sure that that what the point was, other than yeah, the family paid him. He investigated the case for 900 and something hours. I'm not sure ultimately what the purpose of his testimony
I
was.
mean, he did
What he
mention
add, what did
maybe
he
that
add for
Kouri,
the state?
yeah, he mentioned I think that Kouri called him directly and he was like, "Whoa, time out,
Oh,
get the lawyers involved."
he found the My Princess letter.
Oh, okay, okay. But that never came in.
But it didn't come in, and I ultimately think the defense is the one that elicited that
Tony.
testimony
Yeah,
on cross-examination, and then the letter didn't even come in. So I
yeah,
feel like they were fighting over nothing there.
yeah.
Because if you're the defense, right? If this witness hasn't really given anything for the prosecution, if they're not really helping the case, sometimes it's better to just get in and get out because they didn't really hurt you, they didn't really add anything to you. And I feel like the more questions that she asked him, the way that it was coming across and how clunky it was, and just some of the failed impeachment. At the end of the day, I just don't think it helped either side, and it might have hurt the defense more than it helped the prosecution.
I do know that they got that he tracked the cars. He tracked all the cars. He tracked the brother's car, Corey's brother,
The
Kouri, the
mom,
mom, the
Armin.
Carmen. So he did testify that because he's not a state actor, because he's not law enforcement, he is able to basically apply, pretty
But the
easily, it
defense
sounds
got that
like.
out. That didn't come out on the prosecution's case. The defense brought that out.
No, I know. I think that's helpful for defense to show, like basically
This is
you're
how
doing
gung
more
ho this
than law
family was.
enforcement. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like he's doing more, like this case was built by him and not by law enforcement.
I think he
But
thinks that.
well, no, I know he
He
definitely thinks that.
definitely
I
thinks
did feel
that.
bad for him. At one point he had just had a pretty serious surgery, and I did feel bad. I think he got quite uncomfortable. He was on the stand, I think, a lot longer than he thought he would be, and so he had to end up putting on his neck brace. I had a little bit of, oh, it has to hurt because you're sitting there trying to, and then you're just dealing with these questions. So that could also have played into why he was somewhat, frustrated with the line of questioning. But whatever, you're in the middle of a murder trial and you're the, private investigator for the family. So you're coming in. Okay. So I have, let's see, we have 11 minutes before we have to check out of the hotel. So we have to end the
We're gonna have to wrap this
broadcast.
up.
We got to wrap it up. Maybe we'll shoot live or something, or try to do something on the train. I don't know, because we have day 11 and day 12 to catch up on.
A lot
Um,
happens. It's
lot
very
happens.
nuanced, a little bit
Yeah.
boring to some degree because the jury's not there for most of the next 2 days. But we have lots to catch our listeners up with.
Yep, and we plan to do that. But in the meantime, if you like what you've heard and you want to keep listening and following us, please, well, if anything, please like the video if you made it this far. I'm hoping it means you've liked it. Also, too, after hearing the testimony from today or the recap from today, if you would give us a comment, let us know if you have any feedback, hopefully kind or positive or
Constructive.
constructive. Constructive. We take it all. Anyway, thank you guys for being here, and we'll see you next time.